Minus 17 this morning. That was frosty. Frosty and foggy. Didn't see much. So, I've been asked to go join a guy to harvest a buffalo. That'll be interesting. I'm gonna go do it in a little bit. In the meantime, I'm not done yet. Got a little bit of time to kill before I hike around another chunk of property here that I kind of screwed up my scent earlier. And I prepared earlier to get some voices heard. I'm gonna get right into it. Oh. Let's see what we got. Look how it's working. I got my phone hanging on a string on a tree. All right, what do we got? Hello, Steve. Bit of background. I've not hunted for the last 20 years. When I did, I hunted moose on Teslin, Gladys, Atlin Lakes. Fly-ins from Sicannie to the Bessa, Prophet, Musqueam areas. All right, all the same. We've been to the same places. I've taken grizzly and many large blacks. This mentioned to show I'm not a tenderfoot, and I've had a lot of experiences in the bush. It was coincidentally 20 years ago, and the last time I hunted this happened. Kitimat, BC, 20-minute drive from home and a 20-minute drive up North Hirsch Creek logging road. And waiting across the creek were an old bridge, now gone, crossed to the south side. A buddy and I were here the day before, walking along the old road, overgrown with alders, making it almost tunnel-like. There are only a couple of openings along this old road where you could see for any distance past 10 feet. The first opening held a good bull moose, which my buddy took a shot at. We looked for 3 hours after this animal with no luck. Back the next morning, walking up the same overgrown road to continue our search, we reached the same area, and right away I heard something over the noise of the creek, distant. Then I heard it again, closer. I asked my buddy if he had heard that. That's when the loudest scream, bellow, roar that I've ever heard in my life, like a goddamn freight train, was going to come through the bush. My chest tightens up, my heart picks up the pace as I write this. The scream was almost physical, like being punched in the stomach. Completely unhinged, I let two fly from the hip out of my .300 mag, about knee-high, into the thinner alders across from the main opening that held the bull the day before. Not a sound was heard after the roar of my rifle was gone. Not a peep. No retreating animal crashing through the trees. No grizzly coming through the trees at us. Nothing. We walked out there back to back with rifles at the ready. Never, ever, ever have I heard anything that sounded anything close to what this sounded like. And it would have had to have been a dozen grizzly bears screaming through a single megaphone all the same time to be as loud as this was. I could see the headlines. Tough hunter turns to marshmallow. I've never been that scared before or since. It was terrifying. I know what it was, and I think you do too. Garfield Milne. Thanks, Garfield. I'm gathering that you haven't been hunting since because of that, right? You know, a lot of people react differently to getting that absolute terror cut through their soul. It's unfortunate, man. It's unfortunate. I hate it when I hear about people's lives being basically negatively affected for the rest of their freaking lives, right? That's where it's just not fair, you guys. Yeah, I shaved all that crap off my face. Blech. Couldn't take it. It's nothing worse for me than eating the same mouthful of food 3 times for 5 minutes. Here's another one. So I thought I sent this email to you before, but I must have sent it to the wrong email. I don't know. But the story I'm about to send you was originally sent to the BFRO. That moneymaker basically told me I was a liar and that only him and his organizations know what real Sasquatches look like and how to find them. Believe me, I wasn't looking for them. Bobo also seen the story and was genuinely intrigued and said he believed me. Matt, on the other hand, not so much. Matt also told me there was no way I saw Bigfoot because they aren't in that part of Ohio. I'm glad to see someone exposing the fraud Matt really is. So here's my story. Hopefully you share it with the world. I want to share my story with you on my first and only encounter. I was hunting coyotes on a new property for a landowner in a town just outside Marietta, Ohio. I found a dried up beaver dam in the bottom of a holler and found lots of sign, so I decided to go back the next morning. So about an hour before daylight, I snuck down into that bottom and set up waiting for daylight to start calling. The beaver dam was about 200 yards to my right. Right at daylight, something coming off the hillside towards the dam. It was big and dark in color, but I couldn't make out what it was. I'd read reports of bears starting to venture into the area, so I thought that may be what it was. Once it broke the clearing, I knew it was not a bear. The massive creature broke the clearing and was walking around the edge of the dam picking up stuff on the ground. I couldn't tell what it was grabbing, but it would walk a few feet, stop, and pick something off the ground, and just continue to do so. I watched this creature for what felt like an eternity, but it was only about 2 or 3 minutes before it either caught my wind or felt my presence. Either way, it knew I was there. It made a break for the trees, head back up the hill into the briar thicket where it had come from. Thinking back on it now, I should have tried to film it, but I was froze. I couldn't move my body. I knew what I was looking at, even though I couldn't believe it. I was so scared to move, not knowing what it would do or how it would react. I was only 20 years old when that encounter happened, and I haven't returned to the property since then. That has been roughly 7 years ago. I've never told that story before due to being scared of being ridiculed. That was the email I sent to the BFRO. I started watching your videos and realized I'm not alone in these sightings. I'd be honored if you shared this with everyone. Thanks for reading, Steve, and keep exposing the haters. Sincerely, Drew. Okay, Drew, share it, buddy. No problem and no ridicule here. And everybody's safe here, I'll tell you what. I'll bite my lip, my thoughts of those people. Hey, Steve, my name is blank. Don't use my name if you share this story. I've been watching and following your channel religiously for a couple of years now. I was raised on a ranch east of Chetwynd, not far from your elk hunting ground. And I have a story to tell you about my experience with Bigfoot in the Peace area. It's basically where I am now. Well, what am I, about half an hour north of there or something right now. It was 2008 and I was 14. It was August 15th, opening evening of the infamous Any Bull General open season for moose. I was determined to take a bull with my bow solo that year. I'm fortunate enough to live where I can leave from my door and walk into decent hunting for all 4 deer species. So that evening I slipped into my boots and grabbed my bow and headed out behind the house toward the beaver dam pond, where I knew had been a couple of small bulls hanging around about a mile away. There was a narrow road, barely wide enough to drive a tractor down. That ran from the yard out to a small hayfield about halfway between my house and where I thought those little bulls would be hanging out. When I reached the small hayfield, only about 60 yards wide and 200 long, I decided to walk down the fence just inside the field to avoid trying to find my way through the 12-foot-high willow mass outside the fence, making all kinds of noise. I'm usually very comfortable on my home property because it's mine. I know what's around. But this time I was uneasy, and I found myself constantly watching my backtrack. When I got about halfway down the field, I stopped in my tracks and literally dropped my bow in the grass when an 8-foot-tall, 500-pound reddish-brown creature stepped over the 5-wire fence into the field, carrying what would look like one of the neighbor's meat pigs over its shoulder as if it wasn't heavy at all. This massive creature, slightly hunched over, started walking across the 60-meter-wide field to my right. It took about 6 steps and was nearly halfway across the field when it turned its head and locked eyes with me. This friggin' thing stared into my soul, man. After a stare down that lasted only a split second, but seemed like forever, all I could do was take a knee and stare as it immediately kicked into high gear and ran as fast as he could and jumped over the barbed wire fence on the other side of the field without dropping the pig. Who can jump a barbed wire fence while carrying a 300-pound pig? After it made it over the fence, it disappeared into the timber without making much of a sound. I picked up my bow, ran back to the house as fast as my legs would carry me, and I strictly rifle hunted on my own property out of fear for a couple of years after that. I never told anyone this story because my parents are the Sasquatch skeptical type, but I know full well what I saw. I thought I'd share it with you, and thank you for being the voice of the good, honest people. Shoot me a message for a beer if you're ever traveling through the Peace. Okay, man. You know, the Chetwynd area, Tumbler Ridge, Hudson Hope, Williston Lake, Fort St. John, Grand Prairie, Pink Mountain, 101, Fort Nelson. It's nonstop up here. And when you're in groups of people, when you're hunting, when you're in your neighborhood here with other people that hunt or whatever, other people that know, if you just bring it up without a playful, joking tone, like a dead solid, dead serious attitude. Say, hey, does anybody know of anybody that's heard or seen anything kind of weird in the forest? Or seen something that just probably shouldn't exist? Anybody hear about anything like that? And just drop it as an absolute, honest, inquisitive question, which it is. And you will get 10 times more replies than you would as if you said, hey, does anybody believe in Bigfoot? You know what I mean? The amount of people and A-type hunters, guides from around this particular zone right around here that have emailed me with seeing these things around here is off the charts. And I wasn't too far away from you where I had my trail camera spun as far as I could reach, but that high, spun around to face the tree a foot away from it, and that's when I found all those poplars broken off. I've had a lot of people. It's funny how a lot of people will blow a gasket. They won't say a mildly friendly tone like, "Oh, do you think that might have been a bear that broke those off?" Because bears break those young poplars off sometimes. And instead, a lot of people go, "That's a bear, you stupid so-and-so, 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 what an idiot." And it's really weird. It takes me back, not to take me back, but I find it interesting how people react, right? I mean, so if somebody videotaped a whole pile of poplars, snapped off about my shoulder height or a little higher, and in that video, there must have been 40 of them, 50 of them, all snapped off. And I'm pretty sure I've seen what bears do to young poplars and alders. I've been in the woods a little bit. Otherwise, I wouldn't have shared the video. But that's right near where you saw this thing with a pig, and not too far away. And I looked at every single one of those branches where the breaks were, and there wasn't one. And you can scrape that bark with your fingernail. That's how soft it is, green. There wasn't one mark from anything hard, like a fingernail, a claw, or a tooth. Nothing. Not on one of them. And the clincher of the deal was there was about 4 or 5 in a bouquet, ripped out, roots and all, on the ground in one spot. And how I found that was I went on a deep timber hike for probably 2 kilometers and did a big loop coming up through the timber, came in this opening, and that's where I found it. It was nowhere near the road. But anyway, just thought I'd drop that one to let you know that this is going on a lot where you are. And then again, I mentioned earlier, I had a guy show up right side of my truck as I talked to somebody at home, and he just went like this with his phone, and he showed me a trail camera photo, broad daylight. It looked to be first light by the tone of the light, possibly last light, a reddish brown, upright thing running out of the poplars across in front of the trail camera, and it looked to be about 100 yards away from the camera, crystal clear. Couldn't see the face, but definitely head to toe, long reddish brown hair. He showed it to me, and I'm like, yeah, there's another picture. I didn't even think to get the guy to text it to me or share it, but I threw out a shout out on a few of the videos, see if he would email them to me, share the world, but he hasn't. And obviously he knows who I am because he came right up to my truck, never met him before in my life, and he's not sharing the photo. Another thing too, if somebody had that unbelievably, probably detailed or expensive suit made in the Peace Country just to do that for a kicks, that picture similar to it would have been popping up all the time by now. You don't go and make a costume like that, put it on to make one trail camera photo and never ever do it again and never share it with anybody ever, right? So I have a funny feeling that trail camera picture is legit. It looked legit to me when I first saw it. My gut said, whoa. And that was somewhere around Chetwynd in somebody's ranch field. You can see the mowed off field in the back is definitely fall, late fall. The leaves are gone off the poplars. But anyway, there you go, you guys. That last story of the pig sounded a little familiar. It could have been read over a year ago, but I am digging emails out of my old phone that aren't marked as read. And it kind of bugs me that there's people that sent in emails like over a year ago and they haven't read yet. And it's definitely not intentional, you guys, all right? But anyway, I just did a long walk. I'm walking back to the truck, got warm enough to, I could stand here and relax and share some. So I'm going to go out and see about this buffalo thing and then and carry on. And I'll be making some more shares as I go and getting more voices heard. And we're not going to stop. And I have a feeling we're making a lot of progress. I know we're making a lot of progress. So, but that's the only way you make progress is by talking to the people. It's the only way. I will check in shortly.